Hey, I want to do a video on antinatalism and talk about some of the concepts behind the concept of antinatalism, the idea. And I would consider myself an antinatalist, and what the antinatalist pretty much believes is he's pretty much against any kind of the extinction of the continuation of the human species. I think antinatalism has a lot to do with the human species because it doesn't really consider animal life, any kind of animal life or insect life outside the human species, or any kind of mammalian life outside the human species. It pretty much says stop nataling, stop having babies. Natal, that has to do with babies. And I would say that I'm pretty much against procreation, though I would give opportunity for in the right circumstances, based off of some kind of democratic decision, to have some kind of program where we gradually reduce the population, and that's basically the most humane way possible, other than some kind of catastrophic event, which is something that the antinatalist doesn't necessarily advocate for. But if that were the case, hopefully the catastrophic event would be big enough that it wouldn't be something that would wipe most of us out, only to leave the rest of us scavenging like cockroaches and rats out in the wastelands that remain after some kind of catastrophic event, which would be obviously very bad and disastrous. So I would say that would be obviously something good, but it would have to be something at least as big as something that wiped out the dinosaurs. Obviously something bigger because it left a lot of life left behind. So yes, the antinatalist doesn't advocate for any sort of violent action. It doesn't advocate for some kind of war. Exactly what it says, anti, meaning against, natalism, having children, reproduction. And it only applies to human beings. And someone, there's another concept that Mendham has brought up, which is someone I've been watching for a while now, and I completely agree with everything he says. Everything he says is spot on and completely correct. And what he's saying is he made up a word, ephilism, which is life backwards, Efilism, which is life backwards and ism at the end. It's a philosophical idea which is anti-life in general, and it's pretty much the hopefully for the hoping and cheering for the, I don't want to put words in exactly, but from what I understand, he hasn't gone over the word as much since I've started watching him, but he's pretty much been talking about and advocating for the extinction of all life, and by whatever means possible, other than some kind of extreme measures, which we don't necessarily know if the risks, the possibility of the life going extinct overwhelming, the possibility of all the suffering that might go through in some kind of catastrophic event put out by human beings, such as like a nuclear holocaust. We're not advocating for some kind of extinction like that. Or the antinatalist and even the ethilist is just advocating against life itself. And ethilism is something, from what I hear, what I've heard him say is it's against animal life as well. It includes animal life. My antinatalism only includes human beings, and by the standard definition that everyone typically goes by when they're discussing the antinatalism, it's not a violent. It's not a violent word. It has no necessarily negative connotations to it. It's just that you want the continuation of the species to come to a halt and stop, usually by some gradual means, humane means, reasonable means, democratic means, in which we can come to a conclusion and convince other people that this game isn't worth playing, recognize that what we're doing isn't anything beyond reproduction and satisfying our desires long enough so that we can reproduce and then become completely expendable so that the next generation can do the exact same thing and reproduce. And it's the same thing, cause and effect, cause and effect. You cause the next generation, the generation is the effect, and they cause the same thing for the next generation, and so on and so forth. And it's not accomplishing much of anything except eating and sleeping and drinking and just so you can reproduce, so that you can have sex and be fooled by the mechanism that makes you want to have sex, the subconscious mechanism that makes you have sex, the desire mechanism, and you do that, and it fools you, but at this point, It doesn't, but it fools you into so you can reproduce and subject, including the risks, on the next generation so that they can experience the exact same thing and maybe something even worse. So the next generation can do the exact same thing. And if the thing that with life is that it's one big problem. Life is just one big problem, and there's nothing you can do about it. Life will find a way to give you problems, and that's all we're trying to do. And it doesn't matter how democratic we make our democracy. It doesn't matter how much we decide to become one with each other, how we decide to make a one-world government and everyone's at peace, because life's going to find a way to make another problem, because without the problems, the life problem doesn't exist. If you have no problems, you're not living. Sort of like you're not thinking if you're not living. And every time if you're living, you have to think. Every moment you're thinking about something, you can't shut your brain off like you think. You're still thinking even if you're daydreaming. So, life is just a consumption game, of course. Obviously, something being regurgitated a lot. It is a consumption game. All we're doing is eating, and we're obviously, the more we be selfish, the more we're selfish, the more that we're taking away from the possibilities of others. I'll eat my ham sandwich, but that means the other person over there, even though everything has an effect on everything that we do has an effect on someone else, usually the more that you're selfish, the more that you consume yourself, the more likely you're going to take away from someone else that can do the exact same thing. That person over there could have had the ham sandwich, but you decided to take it. Maybe they wanted it more than you. You never know. So the life game we're playing is, and the antinatalistic, the advocation of antinatalism is nothing more than just saying that we should just try our best to humanely quit this game and maintain whatever dignity we have, as long as the end goal is the extinction, or not necessarily a negative connotation of annihilation, but we're trying to get rid of the species as humanely as possible. Not just the species, but we want to get rid of all these other species. Sort of like these these advocation groups, I would say, for these animal rights. And they want these animal rights, but they don't recognize their animal rights are only causing more generations of these animals, and maintaining these species is only causing these species to do the exact same thing over and over again. Live just to live. Sort of like a domestic animal. They live just to live. They be treated well, and they're living their life just to satisfy and go to the next day. And that's all these people, these animals out in the wild are doing. These animal rights activists, they're activists for wildlife animals. And what they don't realize, what they're doing is that they're advocating for animals that are going to repeat the same process of being predator and prey. They're doing the same thing over and over again. The risk is so high, they don't necessarily know what they're getting themselves into. And so many species have gone extinct, and we don't even know it. Yet we're so connected that we realize that our comfort of having these animals around is not as extreme or as important as the discomfort that these animals go on a daily basis. All this pain and the becoming prey, getting eaten alive, doing all sorts of things is more important than our missing of the animal. And like I said, there's so many animals that have gone extinct even in front of our own eyes that we haven't noticed it yet. Yet it happens all the time. It's a notion in your head, but the thing is you have to recognize what these animals are going through out in the wild. Why do you think they're being advocated for? For what? So that we can continue hunting them, continue seeing them become prey? Why are they in advocation? Why are these animals being advocated for to begin with? And, these extinct, these endangered animals, because they've gone through so much adversity. They've gone through so much extinction, so much tailoring of their species, and the cut down of the numbers of these species. Want to know why? Because people want to abuse these animals. They want to use them. They want to advocate for them. They want these species to keep on going so they can reproduce and have more kids, and so the process can happen all over again, and it's just not worth it. So the game that we're playing is just the same old thing over and over again. It doesn't matter how good our democracy gets, or how good anything gets, because the problem's going to still remain the same, and the problem is the function of our existence. It's going to be the same no matter what we do, and without the function that we have by our existence, there's not going to be any point to the existence that we're living. We have to create a problem. We have to create a deprivation before our life becomes worth living. Otherwise, what are you fighting for? And once the problems become too big, you almost wonder what the point is anyway. And if you have no problem, essentially, like the thinking thing, like I mentioned earlier, you're not living. It's just the lack of a problem creates a problem in and of itself. Your life will find ways to create problems, and that's the game we're playing. Life is the problem. The sentience is a problem. The life game is continuing to go on, and there's nothing we can do about it but except advocate for some sort of action to limit the population, at least stagnate it, and hopefully go down in the generations to come, and hopefully it's something that happens very soon. So this game is the same over and over again. The Ethalist, as Mendham says, is obviously something that adheres to all species, anti-life. Hopefully anti-life. We almost in a way hope for the red button to come by. But what we can do is, what we can hope for is with antinatalism, which is, they're very similar, only antinatalism doesn't necessarily advocate for some offensive measures against it, sort of like pushing red button. Antinatalism is just against birthing. So when we're talking about antinatalism, it's not a violent word, it's just stop having babies, or at least try your best not to have as many babies as you can. So that's obviously something you need to consider. So when having kids, just make sure you're not having more than 2.1 kids when you're on this and at least by country or by the world standard, I guess, is by the standard, as long as you're under the average human or the median human amount of kids, I guess you'll be fine. I guess you can still consider yourself an antinatalist even if you have kids. It's just advocating for the idea and make sure no one else makes the same mistake you did, especially when they have no means of doing it. And that's what most of the things are. Most of the poor people, it works in the adverse, that the more poor you are, the less capable you are, the more likely you're going to have kids, and that's very anti-productive. And usually the richer you are, the more likely you're not going to have kids, but obviously there's exceptions to both sides of that. So, before this video ends, I guess, I think I covered all my points, and the life game is the same thing over and over again. We're doing the same thing. It doesn't matter how good life gets, life's going to find a way to make sure that we have something to worry about. And if we have nothing to worry about, all we're going to be doing is constantly being in a state where, I guess, of confusion, where we're not really having any problems. But we're having problems, but the life problem is that no matter how many no matter how much there isn't a problem, there's a problem in the fact that there is no problem. And the problem is that you can't avoid these problems because life itself is the problem. I think I made that point clear enough. So yes, I think that's all I have to say, and try your best not to have as many kids as you can. Just try your best, and that's all I have to say. Thank you, and goodbye.